Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Budget Builds Monthly. Today we're back to a standard video. Let's see what kind of system we're building out in this month's Budget Builds Monthly episode. So before we get too far into the video, just want to outline what Budget Builds Monthly is. In case you've seen this before or you're new to the channel, welcome. Let's check out what Budget Builds Monthly is all about. Posting the first Monday of every month, I review your budget request submitted via the Google form down in the description below. Using this information and PCPartPicker, I try to build the best bang for the buck PC within your budget, considering any constraints or platform preferences you may have. We usually make 4 builds, 2 AMD and 2 Intel, using either DDR4 or DDR5. We also check for deals on Micro Center and Newegg to see if we can modify the build to create a better PC within your budget. If possible, we also take a look at the used marketplace too. Next, we compare each build using online benchmarks and list out the pros and cons of the top options. This helps us figure out which build is best for you. And don't forget, we can't do any of this without your input. Speaking of the input, let's see how we fill out the Budget Builds request form. Now, a quick disclaimer to go with this: budget builds will be as close or slightly over the budget due to parts and availability, as well as sales going on at the recorded time. In case you forgot or you're new to the channel, this is how we fill out the Budget Builds request form. For your privacy, we do not collect your Google information. Just don't worry about that, you actually don't have to sign in. Budget builds do not include taxes, fees, or Windows keys unless specifically asked otherwise. Budgets will be in USD. Now, form factor preference, this will determine case size, as in this is the motherboard size we're going to pick. If you want a mini ITX motherboard, we will go with a mini ITX case, unless you want us to get a micro ATX motherboard and then a specific case size, just put here in other. For CPU and GPU preferences, if you want us to build an Intel only system or an AMD only system, and same thing for their graphics cards. If you have any other preferences or requests when it comes to CPU or GPU, like an Intel GPU, just put it here in the other category. Areas of focus just covers the hierarchical standpoint of how we're going to build out the system and spread that budget. If you want us to focus first on your CPU, then your motherboard, maybe your graphics card, we're just going to put the budget more focused towards those. Focus first, and then focus last. We'll just grab some generic and placeholder items for you, the user, to actually pick out later on. For already purchased or own system components, if you already have a power supply or a case or anything like storage, just put it here. Just specify specifically what you have, just so we can work that into the build and we don't have to worry about putting money towards something in that budget that you already have. No sense in buying 2 PC cases if you can just use the one you already have. For peripherals, if you are requesting any, like a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, a headset, just press on the peripheral and then the other just request what kind. For example, if you want a 1440p monitor, just hit monitor and then press 1440p in here. And then other request, no RGB or anything else you want us to know, just press in the other and then hit submit. And that pretty much concludes filling out the Google form. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comment section below. Alright, with all of that out of the way, let's check out what kind of system we're building out in this month's episode. So for the month of April, let's see what kind of response we got. This user has a budget of 6,500 USD. Pretty good type of budget. Wants a working type of system. No form factor preference. Wants an AMD CPU and an NVIDIA graphics card. Dual liquid 4090s plus a Ryzen 7 7950X or a TR. For those who don't know, a TR is an overkill workstation CPU that AMD makes called a Threadripper, and this does not use the standard AM4 or AM5 socket. Focus first on the GPUs, because the 4090s, then the memory and CPU and everything else. No currently owned or purchased system components, no peripheral requests, and minimal or no RGB. So given that $6,500 budget, we have plenty of room and specs to work with. So let's check out what we got. So we're going to start out here with this template build. Graphics cards for sale at the moment are $2,700 USD a piece. I have it overwritten to Best Buy at its MSRP of almost $2,000. Something I brought up last video, graphics card pricing is something that makes absolutely zero sense as to why they're so expensive, especially since MSRP for this card was $2,000 USD. Now these are the specific RTX 4090s with the liquid AIO attached versus the standard RTX 4090 that's an air-cooled card. Now, two other components I've added to this list is the Corsair 5000D Airflow. It is an ETX mid-tower case, not a full tower case. This should be capable of holding any cooling components that we need. And then at least a 1600 watt power supply because we're running dual RTX 4090s. Now what's crazy is these four components bring us to $4,635 USD. And we only have just under $2,000 to finish the rest of this build out. Now here on Best Buy, we can see that it's currently out of stock at that MSRP. Other ones for sale are at $2,700 a piece for this specific MSI card, but even those are out of stock. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to wait for graphics cards to go back in stock. And it seems like that's gonna be a common issue with multiple builds in today's marketplace. Unless we go used, but that's something we're gonna check out later. For our first build, we have the Ryzen 9 9950X. It's a 16 core, 32 thread, 4.3 GHz boosting to 5.7. For our cooler, we have the Arctic Liquid Freezer 3. It's a 360mm AIO. For motherboard, we have the MSI Mag X870E Carbon Wi-Fi ATX AM5 motherboard. For our memory, we have the G.Skill Trident Z5 Neo 64GB kit of DDR5 6000 CL30. A nice 4TB Samsung 990 Pro PCIe 4.0x4 NVMe SSD. We technically could go for a PCIe 5 Gen SSD and just swap it out. It's pretty much what the user wants at that point, but it's a 4TB storage drive. The user didn't really specify their storage requirements. And then we still have that dual RTX 4090, 5000D Airflow case, and our 1600 watt power supply right under our $6,500 budget. Now this is again with the overwritten MSRP of the cards. Most of these cards are way above MSRP, which would bring this way over. And I know the user specified they wanted a 7950X. The 9950X at this point is $100 more, and it's way better. And if we full spec the build, upgraded the RAM later on, added another SSD, it does bring us slightly over that budget by $300, but this is pretty much what the user can fully upgrade to. 128GB of RAM and 8TB SSD, and we'll still have a lot more storage for the M.2 slots. Now the user asked about a Threadripper. The cheapest decent Threadripper CPU is almost $3,000 in on itself, and that's just this list of PCPartPicker. So we could probably source the Threadripper from somewhere else, but $3,000 just for the CPU and another $4,000 just for the basic components without even the motherboard, and we're way over our budget. Now, if we drop the CPU to the specified 7950X, it's not even $100 less, and the overall performance between the 7950X and the 9950X is kind of worth that $60 difference that it is. So we're just going to leave the CPU as is. Now, I wanted to take a look at one more build to see if we could accommodate for a custom water loop. But the overall price we're going to spend on radiators, the tubing, the overall cooling, it would be better than the dual AIOs we're going to be running on the graphics cards, as well as the AIO we're going to be running on our CPU. But unfortunately, we're going to be spending a little bit more on the overall cooling than it would be just running on the AIOs. Yes, it would run better, but we're going to be spending more. And then I'm just going to take a look at some bundled deals, used components, and we can go from there. So with our cooler, we have a budget of $1,365 USD. And then without the cooler, we have a budget of $1,225 USD. So we're going to scroll down to our nice AMD bundles and see what we can get. So we currently have the Ryzen 9 9950X, the MSI X870E. Now, we could go for this. It's an X670E for quite less, but the question is, because the user is going to be running dual RTX 4090s, the reason you're going to spend more because of the PCIe X16 lanes. So you technically could go with this. It'll be at $700 for this bundle, or you can go with this one, and it is the Ryzen 9 9950X, the MSI Mag 870E. Again, the only issue I find with this one, even though it's an MSI board, and we still have an MSI board, is the GPU lanes. So we're going to put a build together with this one, leave our same CPU cooler, and I guess overall save some of that budget. It just means that if you're going to buy the bundle build from Micro Center, just slap on another 32 gig kit of RAM. Unfortunately, it does mean that you're limited to 64 gigabytes of RAM versus our initial one, which is going to max out at 128 gigabytes of RAM. It's all up to the user. So I'm going to slap this build together. We'll take a look at it, and then we'll move on to some used components and probably finalize this build out. So here's the Micro Center bundled deal list that I kind of just slapped together. We have our Ryzen 9 9950X, the MSI Mag X870E Tomahawk, and a 32 gig kit of G-Skill Flare X5 DDR5 6000 CL30. Now it's about $800 USD overall before tax. I also added a couple extra components for upgrading, like another kit of the G-Skill RAM and another 4TB SSD for more storage. Now the good thing is we're under that allotted budget, meaning we could add more storage if we wanted to. But that's the thing about now having to repurchase system components because of those bundle deals. If we could change out the RAM to a 64 gig kit, which technically we can, it's just upgrading to a 64 gig kit of Corsair Vengeance RGB RAM instead of non-RGB. Now I know the user specified minimal RGB, so even RGB on one component is perfectly fine. It's just something I wanted to bring up for another $100 USD. So for an extra $100, we could wipe this RAM, and get a 64 gig kit, and then another 64 gig kit for 120 gigabytes of RAM. So that pretty much concludes our Micro Center build and bundle deals overall. Let's take a look at some used components and finalize this build. And to just finalize everything out to see if we can save some money going used, we are going to hop over to eBay and see what we can get. Now these are previously sold components. It does throw in a lot of the other RTX cards, even an RTX 5090 for some reason, even though we specifically searched for a 4090. It seems like these cards are still selling for over MSRP, and some of them are selling even a couple $100 under what they're going for on the marketplaces. For example, this 4090 Supreme Liquid, the one we're trying to get, is actually a couple $100 cheaper sold for it here on eBay than it was actually buying it from a marketplace. Now, if you're able to get one of these used, it would be even a couple $100 off, so even then it's not worth it, but most of these things are going for way over MSRP. Now, we ended up building out a couple systems. We didn't really have to test anything as we weren't switching out components. We were actually just adding on to them. Overall, we have our standard build. And then we have our upgraded builds from there. And then we have our Micro Center build that I would recommend. And that's pretty much it. Now, all of these builds will be down in the description below. Now, something we're going to see in other future videos are, until graphics card pricing actually gets fixed, it's going to be very difficult to build any system on any budget unless you're able to do more bundle style deals through Micro Center or any other store that supports those kinds of deals. So unfortunately, this is what we're gonna have to work with for now. And that brings us to the end. Thank you everyone for watching. User, I hope we actually built out some systems within your scope. Everyone else, consider subscribing, fill out that Google form. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike it, and I'll see you all in the next video.